Hello, I'm Dr. Winston York. I'm a software engineer, but I'm also have a strong interest in voting systems. And this fall, where I live, British Columbia is holding a referendum on whether or not to adopt proportional representation. I'm making this series of videos to help voters, particularly conservative voters like myself, make an informed decision about how to vote in this important referendum. Up to this point, I've talked about proportional representation as a general, rather than any of the specific systems. But in this video, I'm going to look at the different systems and how they differ and what are the pros and cons of each. The first system is mixed member proportional. This is a system which was devised by British political scientists after World War II for use in Germany, and it's since been adopted by a number of other countries. It combines elements of first past the post with proportional representation to create a hybrid system. The basic idea is that we create two kinds of seats. There are riding seats, which are elected the same way we do today. The candidate with the most votes in a particular riding wins. But there are also what are called list seats, which are instead given to parties which are underrepresented in how many riding seats they've won. For an example, let's take a look at the 1992 election in BC. Here is the popular vote. You can see the NDP got around 40% of the vote, the Liberals got shy of 35%, and the Social Credit a little bit less than 25%. This here is the seat count. Now you can see that there's a difference between the popular vote and the seat count. The NDP won a lot more seats than their share of the vote might suggest. So they won indeed 50 seats. Under mixed member proportional, we would only have handed around 60% of the seats out in this fashion. And while the results in the ridings would have been similarly lopsided, there were less seats handed out in this fashion. Then what would happen is we would hand out list seats to the parties which were underrepresented. So in this case, both the Liberals and the Social Credit are underrepresented. They won less seats than they deserved, whereas the NDP actually won exactly as many seats as they deserved. Thus, we give additional list seats to the Liberals and Social Credit so that their percentage of the seats in the legislature is equal to their percentage of the popular vote. And that's how the end result is proportional. The good things about this system are that it's well tried, it's been used in a number of countries, and it's relatively straightforward. However, the bad thing about mixed member proportional is there's a number of variations to it, and we don't know which one would be implemented. A big issue is whether or not we would have open or closed lists. In a closed list, the party gets to choose the list and voters have no say over it. In an open list, during the election, voters can vote on the party's list, and that determines which members of the party fill in the various list seats. An additional question is how we determine your party vote. In some systems, your vote for a local candidate also counts as a vote for their party. However, in other systems, you're allowed to vote for a local candidate of one party, but vote provincially for a different party. We don't know which would be the case. Another issue is overhang seats. So let's go back to that 1992 example. The NDP won as many seats in my example as they deserved overall, so they didn't get any extra seats. But what if the NDP had won a few more ridings? What if the NDP had won more seats in ridings than they deserved overall? What would happen? This could be resolved by taking some of the NDP's ridings away, giving even more additional seats to the extra parties, or simply leaving it as it be. We simply don't know what the rule would be in our system. In practice, it's not usually a big deal. A large portion of the seats are counted as list seats precisely to make this situation not happen very often. And it would be very rare that the actual outcome of an election in terms of who could form government would actually hinge on the particular rule used to handle this. So the case of mixed member proportional is, it's widely used and is relatively straightforward. But there are a lot of questions about what precisely we'd be getting if we adopted mixed member proportional. The second system on the ballot, dual member proportional, is closely related to mixed member proportional. The issue is instead of these list seats that don't correspond to any riding, it gives every riding a second representative. So all the ridings would be roughly twice as large and be represented by two people. An exception would be made for the most rural ridings, which would remain with one representative and their current sizes. Unlike the list representatives in mixed member proportional, the second representatives in dual member proportional have to actually run as regular candidates for their seat. And the system tries to ensure that the candidates who become second representatives are candidates who did well in the regular election for that seat. The idea here is that it maintains local representatives, so there's no one who doesn't represent a particular riding. And so this system is attractive to people for whom the local representation is very important. The drawback is that it's somewhat more complicated. The procedure for determining who becomes the second representative for different ridings is pretty involved and complex. Furthermore, it's never been tried. It was a system invented in Canada that has not yet been put into practice. So we would be trying something of an experiment if we adopted dual-member proportional. The final system is rural-urban proportional. This system is a hybrid system. In the urban areas of the province, it would use single transferable vote, but in the rural areas, it would use mixed-member proportional. Single transferable vote is the system we voted on twice before in BC. The single transferable vote uses multi-member ridings. This means that each riding is a fair bit larger and sends multiple representatives. Ballots would be cast by ranking the candidates in order. This means that you could actually rank multiple parties, and you could rank the people within parties, and you can even include independents. And the great thing about single transferable vote is the level of control voters have. Voters have a high level of control because they can actually rank candidates, which provides much more input into the political process simply than voting for your favorite candidate. The drawback is complexity. People find somewhat confusing the process by which the votes are counted, and it also involves having to make a choice amongst many more candidates than you're used to doing under our current system. Fully explaining and articulating the logic behind single transferable vote is beyond the scope of this video. Suffice to say, it's actually a nice system if you fully understand it, but its big drawback is it's very difficult to actually explain and sell to people in a succinct fashion. One area single transferable vote has trouble is rural ridings. In order to be proportional, you need to have multi-member ridings, which makes ridings very, very large, and this is concerning to people who live in rural areas who don't want to be part of a massive riding where they would live a long, long way from their MLA. Rural-urban proportional attempts to address this by using mixed-member proportional in rural areas. This ensures that in urban areas we get all the benefits of single transferable vote, but we don't have the drawbacks in the rural areas. However, this hybrid system actually deeply concerns me, in particular because small parties are treated differently in the different systems. Under the single transferable vote, the votes from small parties transfer to larger parties, whereas under mixed member proportional, support for parties too small to win seats basically get thrown away. I think either is a defensible way of designing an electoral system, but it's problematic when in rural areas you're going to do one and in urban areas you're going to do something different. That's asking for some sort of strange bias to happen. Now, I've thought about it, and I don't see that there's a particular bias for either side of the political spectrum in this, but in principle, it's concerning, and therefore, I'm very suspicious of this particular hybrid system. Generally, across the system, there's some questions we don't know, such as can we still recall MLAs? If there's a by-election, how does that work under any of these systems? These are questions which haven't been answered, which ideally would have been. Those are the three systems we'll be voting on in this referendum. The polling data I've seen suggests that mixed member proportional is way out ahead of the other options. And if we adopt proportional representation, we're almost certainly going to be seeing some sort of mixed member proportional system. I hope that has given you the information you need in order to have a basic understanding of how these systems work, as well as the pros and cons of the different systems.